Welcome back to I Know How You Feel, a podcast for common experiences not so commonly shared. This is a platform for growth, connection, and mindful conversation. Today on the podcast, we have Lauren. Lauren is a mother, writer, and entrepreneur based in Los Angeles. She is passionate about sharing her journey through an unfiltered lens, as well as the lessons she's learning along the way. Her favorite quote is, "We're all just walking each other home" by Ram Dass, which touches on the belief that we're all interconnected and here to help each other. Let's connect with Lauren. Hi, Lauren. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. As most of us know, parental loss is really something we are all set up to experience. And it's not really something that anyone knows how to navigate. Lauren is on here today to talk about navigating a different kind of parental loss, as not everybody um, experiences a parent dying in the prison system. So I want to just get into it and have you take us back to the beginning and talk to us about what it was like with your dad in your childhood.
So, my dad, him and my mom had my sister and I very young. They were 18 when they got pregnant with my sister. And, they were kids. And my mom ended up leaving him when I was only 4. I don't think my dad was ever really equipped with the tools to navigate, challenging, heavy, difficult life experiences like divorce. And he didn't really have a lot of emotional support. So he kind of crumbled after my mom left and got onto drugs. So he got heavy into meth usage, which, meth was a newer drug back then. I don't want to age myself, but it was pretty new. And he got on it really bad and then started distributing it, manufacturing it, all of the things. And so growing up with a drug addict parent, it's something now looking back as a mom now, I'm like, wow, I can't even like that's almost like surreal that that was my childhood, but growing up it was kind of normal. That's all I really knew. But yeah, with an addict parent, I'm sure anyone that has dealt with addiction, with parents or loved ones, it's hard because they're not themselves. They're almost like a muted, you know, just different lesser version of themselves. So it was really challenging because as a little girl, I just wanted his attention, I wanted his love, and it just wasn't really him. The drug ruled his life. That was his primary focus, that was his priority, and his family, me, my sister, we really we felt like neglected and unloved and unimportant and ignored. And that's really, really challenging, I think, as a child to navigate that because you don't understand. When you're a kid, you think everything that a parent is doing is about you or something must be wrong with you. And you don't really understand that, wait a minute, my parent is struggling, with himself. And that's where his challenge is with his addiction. And it's not with anything to do with me. And so it took a long time to navigate that and to understand it. But yeah, so he eventually got arrested by the feds when I was 10 and went to federal prison for many years. Got out when I was in high school. And I would visit him in prison growing up. So it's definitely a surreal experience. All of my friends were like, going to like fun things on the weekends, with their family. And I was like going to visit my dad in prison. So interesting childhood dynamic. But he ended up kind of going in and out my entire life. So it was just kind of a revolving cycle of him thinking, when he was in there, he'd be like, I'm going to get out, and I'm going to get clean and I'm going to be the dad you deserve. And it was A lot of just promises that weren't kept, and a lot of just him battling addiction and never being able to beat it.
I'm just curious how you were feeling. I know you were talking a little bit about how normal it felt, like that was your childhood, so that was your normal experience. How did it affect you when he was in and out of prison? Did you feel like something was missing, or did your mom kind of take on both roles for you?
Since my parents were divorced, I will say, like, my mom was for sure my primary. And I am so thankful that I had one parent that was consistent and loved me and was there. So thank God I had her. When he went to prison, it was challenging because there's just so much shame, right? And embarrassment. I think that's what I felt the most. I think when you're a kid, right, you just want to be accepted, you want to fit in. And I didn't actually tell anyone, any of my friends' parents. I kept my dad's addiction and him being in and out of prison a complete secret up until I was in college. Like my best friends all through elementary, middle school, and high school had no idea what I was going through. And all of the like weekends I was visiting him in jail, I would just lie when people asked me what I did that weekend because it was so embarrassing and I felt so much shame and I knew they would judge me. I remember being in the back seat of a car with my best friend and her dad was an attorney and very successful. And I remember him chatting with me in the car and he was like, "So Lauren, what does your dad do?" And I just got this pit in my stomach and I was like, "There's no way I can tell him he's in prison for meth." Like he wouldn't let my friend hang out with me. Of course that would be a red flag to a parent, right? So I remember just being like, he's in sales and he kind of lives far away. Like I just, it was I think just because of the age that he went in, it was on one of the most challenging aspects of that was just what to tell my friends because you care so much more about at that age you care so much more about your peers and your friends and trying to fit in. And I felt like a complete outcast. I had no one to really talk about it. I felt like I had to lie and almost live a double life. And then another really challenging aspect was that, the disappointment. I remember my dad would write me a lot of letters from jail just promising he was going to get better. When I tell you, I would cling to those letters. When I got them in the mailbox, I would like run in so excited to get his letters. And I had this like special little velvet box that I had by my bed where I would keep all of his letters and like read them all the time. Sorry, I might get choked up. And I just like clung to those letters for years. And I would like show my mom so excited. When dad gets out, he said he's going to do this with me. And my mom was always so supportive. One thing I really respected is she actually never talked bad about my dad. She was always like super excited and she was always, an advocate for him and for us having a relationship with him. And so she would get excited too. And she would like, "That's great, honey. I'm so excited for you." And she was supportive of me going to a prison to visit him with my grandparents. So she was always very supportive of him and our relationship. I remember when he got out for the first time, I was so excited because I had been getting these letters and visiting him for like about 5 years. He was gone. And now I was in high school. And when he got out, very quickly, like within months, he was back on meth. And I could tell that, all of those promises from all of those years just completely, you know, went away. And I realized very quickly that it wasn't going to happen and I wasn't going to get my dad. And so that heartbreak, oof, it was devastating. After that, I didn't go, when he went in and out, I never went to visit him in prison again. I really protected myself. And I think that I became very guarded and I shut down in a lot of ways because that little girl was just so hurt and so disappointed that it was really hard to come back from that. So that was a really, really challenging time.
That would be really challenging. And because I know you're a very self aware person, after you like shut down and felt really guarded after, the neglect and just feeling unloved and these different emotions, looking back on your early adulthood years in high school, did you notice that that affected your relationships with other people because of the relationship with your dad?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, and I'm not, a therapist or anything, so I don't know all of the dynamics, but I do think, girls with dads, there can be an interesting dynamic because when we look at our romantic relationships, especially like, when you're navigating that as a high school student, right, for the first time, I could tell that I definitely liked attention, from boys, probably wanting what I didn't get from my own dad. But, it's interesting. A lot of girls, might be attracted to men that are similar, right? Or boys that, maybe neglect you but I was really lucky in that I ended up in a relationship in high school with almost the opposite of my dad. I ended up being loved and falling in love with a amazing man who treated me so well and was so good to me and so safe and loving. And I was with him for like 15, 16 years. So I am so thankful that he came into my life almost around that same exact time, because he was so healing and truly showed me what it was to be like truly loved by a man, consistently. And that was truly one of the biggest blessings of my life.
That's so on brand for you to immediately be on a healing journey, and I think that's really great that you were able to find that after everything that you had gone through in your childhood. At what point did you find out about your dad's cancer?
Yeah. So my dad, he was in and out of prison, and around, gosh, I think I was probably around 29, 30-ish. Um, and I had been told by my grandma that, and that's obviously his mom, she casually mentioned that my dad was having trouble like swallowing food and choking and having like acid reflux and stuff. And, I don't know, I got kind of this very strange feeling where I was like, whoa, it seemed like a little thing, but I knew it was bigger and I could just tell. And I had a feeling that he had cancer. The prison system's interesting because he had been trying to get attention for his issue for a long time, like for months and months and months. And he would go to, I guess, like the nurse or the, little, I don't know what they have there, but maybe a little clinic in the prison. And he would go there and they would just say, like, oh, it's acid reflux. Like, here's some whatever. I don't know what they give them for them, but like a little pill and say, just take this. And they pretty much like shooed him away for a long time to the point where he could like barely eat. So he requested that we come see him. And I did. And I was super nervous. Went to go see him, and he walked into the little visitation area, and he was so skinny. And ugh, I hadn't seen him in a really, really, really long time. And he gave me a hug and he was like, well, I'm awkward and I didn't know what to say. So I was like, you look good, Dad. And he was like, no, baby. He's like, I'm not good. He's like, I have cancer. And that's when it was, I felt like my world crumble. And then he's like, I haven't told Granny yet. I haven't told my mom yet. And she was there with us visiting. And he's like, I'm going to tell everybody in a little bit. So he did. He told my granny, me, my sister. And yeah, he said it's not looking good. He told me privately, he was like, Lauren, if I die, he said, if I die, I'm okay because I know I blew my life. And it was just, you know, heartbreaking. But he's like, please promise me that you'll get me out of here. I don't want to die in prison. And I said, I'll do everything I can. And then we found out that there's something called a conditional medical release. And so a lot of people, if you're in prison and you're in there for a nonviolent crime and you're terminal and you have less than 6 months to live, sometimes they will let you out to die at home. So we did get him out and he was able to go home for a little while. Unfortunately, he ended up getting back on drugs and was arrested again and ended up going back to jail, back to prison, and died in there alone. So that was a horrific last couple of months, probably one of the most challenging periods of my life.
Absolutely. That would be so hard to watch and just feel so helpless. What did the prison do for him? What did his end of life care look like?
Yeah, it's not good. The prison system is pretty inhumane when it comes to that. They don't really give people a lot of dignity in their death. I remember calling and talking to the warden of one prison, and I was like, will you let us know how he's doing? Will you let us come visit him before he passes? How does this work? And he was like, no, we're not able to do any of that, but we will mail his body to you. That's all they said. And it's like, my dad was a drug addict. He wasn't a horrible person. He was on a really bad drug that he could never beat. And, yeah, when he was arrested initially, like when he was arrested and he had cancer, he was in county jail for like 40 something days, never got to see daylight, pretty much just deteriorated. Nobody was really caring for him. And then he lasted like 3 or 4 months after he was arrested and like truly was never given any treatment, any care. He was kind of like in and out of prisons, jails, hospitals. Like I don't really know the extent of it because no one really fully communicates with you. It's not like you have a point person that's telling you what's going on. You kind of have to really stay on top of it and try to call and get in touch. And they don't want to tell you a lot of stuff because for instance, like if he's in the hospital, they don't have security there. So it's a bizarre, but they don't want you to know where they are in case I don't know if you come get them out or I don't know what the deal is, but they are so secretive with information. So sometimes we would just find things out through, for example, there were inmates that were also in there, and the inmates' family would call my family to let them know little things. Like it was very challenging to get information, and so we did make a connection with one of the nurses that worked at one of the prisons. And we pretty much just like begged her to please let us know if she heard anything. And she did end up calling and she let us know that he was not doing well, but that he was awake and that she was going to try to get this form over to us that we would fill out and see if she could get the warden to sign it to allow a special visit before he passed. And we all got the form in, and she was like, I'll let you guys know by 11 a.m. tomorrow, and then you'll need to get here as soon as possible. And I did get the call at 11 a.m. the next day, but it was a call saying that he had passed away. So, never got to make it. I'm there to see him to say goodbye. And at his funeral, a woman came and was talking in the funeral about how her husband was in jail with my dad his last days, which I didn't know any of this. And she said that her husband was an inmate with my dad the last, little bit, and he had been taking care of my dad. He bathed him, he talked to him, he held his hand. He was there every step of the way because no one else was taking care of him. And his wife was saying how, he said that like no man needs to die in that type of condition and that it was pretty horrific how little care he got and how little love. And so I think that man is like an angel. Because he didn't have to do that. He was just an inmate, but it gives me a lot of peace knowing that he had that man with him towards the end, and he would have his wife call my grandmother to give her updates and stuff. So that was a really beautiful part of it, of just like restoring your faith in humanity, right? Just, random people stepping up, so that was a really beautiful part of it. But there's so many things about my dad's death that I will never know. I'll never know how he looked. I'll never know how he was doing. I'll never know the struggles he faced. I'll never have a goodbye. I'll never, there's just so many unanswered things with it. And it's just horrible to know that he had to die alone in that world. That is just so harsh and inhumane, and no human should ever have to go through that, especially someone that's just simply an addict.
Absolutely. And I think that this story really highlights how humanity can be so beautiful and we're all so connected to each other, but the system is so broken. And I know
Yes.
that's a way bigger conversation, but the fact that the system wouldn't help your dad, and like you said, or he wasn't a violent offender. He was an addict. He needed more help that the system wasn't giving him. But then you had this beautiful human step up. I'm sure after everything that you had to go through with that experience, that was like a very soothing thing to know that he wasn't alone in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so interesting because, through this experience, I just realized how important empathy is. And, we say that all the time is like empathy, right? But that's the one thing that's missing from our system. There is no empathy. There is no real wanting to help these people and hold space for them and help them with their suffering or whatever they're going through. It's a very harsh way of dealing with people that are really struggling and need help. Um, and this man, obviously, who was an inmate himself, I have no idea what he did to get there, but it's like for him to be able to have that empathy for my dad and to see, wow, this man is struggling. He needs help. Let me show up for him because every human deserves that. We all deserve someone to help us and to hold us in some of our most challenging, darkest times, especially like ushering us to the end of life. No one should have to go through that alone. And it's heartbreaking that our system doesn't have that compassion and empathy, but it's also beautiful that us as humans in general still do. So it was definitely a relief to hear it, but it's still just so hard because when it's someone you love, you never want to imagine them in a situation like that. It's not right.
It's not right. And it's really interesting. I just want to go back to what you were saying about the harshness of the system. What's really beautiful about your dad's story and the man who helped him is the harshness of life is usually what gets addicts into the system. And then the system is harsh. And so you perpetuate this cycle, but that man broke it. So I think it's a really
Yes.
interesting thing to point out through that grief that somebody did break a cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because the system is designed to keep you in it. And this is like maybe a whole other tangent, but um someone that's battling addiction, when you go into a federal prison, there isn't a lot of help in terms of like understanding your addiction and your demons and the things that you're struggling with. And even if you are able to maybe like overcome it and get out on the other side, it's not easy to get a job. It's not easy to move on with your life, right? And so what my dad struggled with is like once you're a convicted felon, your options are limited. So he kept kind of going back to selling drugs because that's what he knew, and that's all he could kind of do because he couldn't really get any jobs. And so it's hard because I feel like it just conditions you to stay in the system. And I think he just got caught up in that world. And there's a little part of me that thinks he was relieved when he was arrested and was in prison because it's like he had that structure and he didn't have the temptation, and that's almost what he became comfortable with, which is such an interesting perspective. But yeah, it's beautiful because with the man helping him is you realize that you think that in life, we are able to really help people in so many different ways. And we think that like changing the world or, we have such big ambitions, right? But you can also just like change a life in so many ways. You could be an inmate in prison who really like loves and supports and guides someone into the end of their life. Like that's huge. That man I know changed my dad's life. He changed my life. He is the biggest blessing, truly a guardian angel. And it's like he was able to do that from jail, right? So it's like, in terms of what we're capable of doing, we have the power to really, really help each other in ways that doesn't have to be in some grand scheme. It doesn't, you could be anywhere. You can literally be in prison or working at Starbucks or crossing the street, like whatever it is, wherever we are, whoever we're around, like we really do have the capacity and the ability to make someone's life better and easier and to show up with love every day. And I think that's been such a huge lesson for me personally of this man who is literally just still, I think, in prison and changing lives and, helping others no matter where he is or what he's doing. So I think that's a beautiful lesson that came from it for me personally.
I love those reflections. And, reflections usually come out of a pretty dark grieving process. Talk to us about what your grieving process looked like and how you were able to come out of it from this experience.
You know, truthfully, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger because my dad really screwed up. He really screwed up by getting sent back to prison and getting back on drugs. I was very hurt. The fact that we worked so hard to get him out of prison and I was flying home all the time. I was going to his appointments with him. I was trying to spend whatever last time we had together, trying to spend it with him and get to know him and love him and because I always thought there'd be more time, and I always thought I'd have a relationship with him once he got older and got off drugs, all these things. I was like, he's not going to be 60 doing meth, right? Like I was like, we'll get to know each other later in life. But he got diagnosed at 52, so he got diagnosed very young, and died at like 54. But yeah, so I was trying to like make up for all of this lost time and get to know him, and I was like, okay, we might have like 6 months to a year of him living. I want to fly home. I want to get to know him. And, the fact that he went back on drugs, it was honestly just like such a stab straight to my heart. I was like, once again, he's disappointing me in this way. Doing what he's done his whole life is promising me, like he'll get better and he'll be my dad and we'll get to, have a relationship. And so it was like he blew his life and he blew his death too, right? Like there was so much anger there of like why did he do this? And so I never got to say goodbye. There was a ton of anger. I just didn't understand how he could choose drugs again over his family and over himself, truthfully, right? Like he chose drugs over it all. It really did kill him. And that I think was the hardest part. So there was a lot of anger, just knowing that I didn't get to say what I wanted to say at the end. I didn't get to be there with him. And I really just let myself feel that anger for a little while. I let myself be angry. I let myself cry and scream and all of the things. But I find that when you actually let those feelings come up and you honor them, I do find that they pass through you a lot faster than resisting them. So I let that all come up. And then after a while, I just knew that hanging on to the anger doesn't serve me. And I did, v- you know, decide that I was going to kind of forgive him and that I can imagine the amount of pain he was in. I can imagine how hard his addiction must have been to even go back to that, knowing he's dying, right? Like, yeah, that was just a battle he could not win. And for that, I feel, so sad for him. And I have so much compassion and knowing what he had to go through in the end. I think just like stepping out of yourself for a little bit and imagining just him as a human and what he must have been going through. So once I kind of got through the anger, I was really able to come back full circle to the love. And I talk to him a lot. I still do, and I did a lot after he passed, and I talked to him a lot, sharing that I forgave him, that I love him, that, I'm always with him, and I hope he's always with me. And um, I was able to really bring it back around to love, and now I fully just look at it with so much compassion. I have zero anger, only love. And, I hope wherever he is on the other side of this, that he is at peace. I truly do.
I think that's really beautiful that you're able to come, like you said, full circle into the love. That would be really tough to do. Do you get to connect with him kind of in the afterlife? Have you gotten any signs from him after that gave you some peace with all the conversations you said you were having with him?
Yeah, yeah. So I was talking to him a lot, even like right before he passed. I had an idea. I felt it. I knew it was coming up. And so I was talking to him a lot because I do believe that even if you can't be there with someone when they're passing, I do think you can still talk to them and energetically you can feel them and be there with them. And that brought me so much peace. So pretty much the last thing my dad ever said to me was over text messages. But he said, like the last thing he ever said was "I love you," and or I said "I love you," and he said "I love you more." And he always said "I love you more." That was kind of his thing. Is like "I love you more." It's how he finished like every conversation. But when he passed away, when I got that call, I didn't know what to do, and I don't have any family where I live, so I was all alone. And I remember just screaming at my car and driving, and I didn't know where I was driving to. Um, and I ended up randomly at like a Home Goods. I like 20 miles from where I lived. I just drove and drove and drove and just drove randomly and sat in a parking lot at Home Goods. And I went inside and I was just like walking through the aisles. Like I'm telling you, my face was black with mascara. I was unwell. It was probably like 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and I walk in and I'm just like walking like a zombie. And I end up like walking down this aisle, and at the very end, like looking straight at me directly, was this big piece of wall art that said "Love you more." And I got like super spooked. And I just like said, okay, like turned around. I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to my car now and go home. But that was a big thing that happened. And then months later, I was in Bali, still really grieving him. And I remember like in Bali, you can like grab a taxi, but it's like a motorbike, and they like take you, like a guy on a motorbike takes you wherever you want to go. And I did that. So this guy was like on a motorbike with me, and I was crying, and he could tell. And we ended up having a conversation over Google Translate, and because he didn't speak any English. But he was so sweet, and he was asking me over Google Translate, like, about my parents, and I said, "My dad is dead." And he wrote me just the most beautiful messages in Google Translate. Like, truly, this man was an angel. Like, he was doing God's work, and he was just like, "Your dad is with God, and please don't be sad. Please don't cry." He's like, "I'm sit here to tell you this right now. Like, your dad is okay, and he loves you." And it was just truly just an angel. As soon as we had that conversation, I went back to my hotel room and just sobbed on the floor, and I just felt his love so deep within me. And then the next day I went to have lunch with a friend, and I walked into this little restaurant in Bali, and in flowers, like right at the entryway of this restaurant, in beautiful orange flowers, it was written in flowers, "I love you more." And it just, like, made me stop in my tracks, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is my dad," and I felt my dad so present in that trip to Bali, and he was showing up in every way, through angels, through random people, through flowers, just through everything. He was so there with me, holding me in that. I really was able to get to peace, and I am totally at peace now. It's still so painful, but only I only have love for him, and I have so much outrage at the prison system and how they treat people, because it's not just my dad. I mean, people are dying in jail all the time, and you don't hear about it. You're pretty much, the system owns you, and there's nothing that anyone can do. And I think these people forget that, like, the people in jail have loved ones. They have mothers, they have fathers, they have children. Like, they have people that love them. And to not treat them humanely is just, it's devastating, and it's unforgivable. And I just wish that we had more awareness and we talked about it more.
We're talking about it right now.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, truly.
I've I've appreciated all the podcast conversations because I always get to learn something, and I think these are things that need to be addressed because I mean, I lost my dad 8 years ago, and I lost my stepdad from cancer when I was 15, and they were very, I would say, normal deaths, but these are the kind of conversations that are important to have because they bring to light the things that are broken in the world and the systems. So I really appreciate you sharing this with us. I have a couple more questions I want to ask. I know you're a parent now, what your reflection is on your dad's life as a mom, looking back on your dad and how he parented and how he lived, and now being a parent yourself. What do you reflect on when you're thinking about it?
There's a couple things. I think it makes me really sad because when you are a parent, right? Like there's just so much love you have for your child. I love my son more than anything in this whole world. Nothing even comes close to comparing. And it makes me sad that my dad missed out on that love. He really did. He missed out on getting to experience really being a parent and all of that love that he would have received and that he would have been able to give. But I also, on the flip side, as a mom now, I see how we're all just kind of trying our best and no one has it figured out. And, you realize very quickly that as a parent, like it's my first time as a parent and it was his first time as a parent, and he was figuring it out too. And I like our parents, even at every age they are, even though they're older, it's still their first time living this life. Like they're still just like trying to figure it out just like we are. He just had a couple more years on me, but we're all just trying to figure it out. So it's like I think when I'm able now to have even more empathy for him because although he was a parent, that doesn't mean he's perfect. That doesn't mean that he had it all figured out. He had his own demons and his own struggles, and um, he wasn't perfect. And I'm not perfect as a mom. So I'm able, I think, to have more empathy for him now because we're all just kind of winging it and trying to do our best. But it definitely makes me sad that he missed out on the love that being a parent just gives you and all of those joys because I know he loved us. He just wasn't able to kind of really get it together.
Yeah, and I've heard that too before. Once you become a parent, you really start having grace for your own parents. And it was their first time, and it really takes you into a different place in yourself because I think as humans it's natural to judge um and be like, well, why couldn't they do this or why couldn't they step up? But being able to have those experiences yourself and know we're trying our best, I think that's a really important thing to recognize. And I want to segue into your card deck that you created. Speaking of becoming a new parent, talk to us about Good Talk Baby and where the idea came from and where we can find it and what it's all about.
Oh, I love this. Yeah. So I created a conversation and activity card game for new parents because when I was in early postpartum, I remember like rocking my son at 3 in the morning. It's pitch black, everything's, quiet, and it's just me and my son in the little nursery and like the moon shining through the window. And I remember just being so tired and having a nursery full of things that I like wasn't even using half the time. And I remember just being like, the one thing I really need is the product I don't have. And it's how to navigate all of the issues I was feeling, all like my hormonal changes and my exhaustion. And, I could hear my fiance at the time like snoring in the other room, sleeping peacefully, and just like the relationship dynamics that were changing and all of the huge life changes that come with being a parent that you just cannot prepare for. It really is something like nothing you've experienced before, and there are amazing parts of it. Like it's the best feeling in the world and there's so much love, but it's also really really hard and challenging because it's such an abrupt change. So I wanted to create something for the parents to help them really navigate all of the big life changes and relationship changes and personal identity shifts that are happening, because I feel like it's really really important and it's something that we don't talk about it enough. And even if we do talk about it enough, there's not really a lot of products or tools or things available to help parents navigate it. So, yeah, so I created this conversation and activity card game. It's not intimidating, it's very fun, and it gets parents really talking and connecting and sharing their personal experiences of what they're dealing with, and also like what they're dealing with as a couple. And it has kind of like check in prompts to do weekly as like a weekly ritual. It has really like deep diving questions to help, connect over conversation. There's a lot of like bonding activities, things you can do to kind of initiate loving action. And then there's like cards to help divvy all the home and baby duties because a huge part of having a child is you have all these new responsibilities. And sometimes I think a lot of moms feel like they are taking the brunt of it. So you can really like sit down and kind of look through all these cards, all of these responsibilities, divvy them up and say like, hey, are there any imbalances here? Or do you want to take these responsibilities because this would really help me? So it's really this beautiful like new parent relationship kit. And it's great. I am so proud of it. I put my heart and soul into it, and I spent so many sleepless nights trying to figure out how I could create something that would truly help new parents. And if you look at the statistics, the Gottman Institute found that almost 70% of new parents said their relationship declined in satisfaction after having a baby, and 20% of new relationships end within the first year of having a baby. So it's challenging, and I just think there needs to be more awareness and there needs to be more tools to help, new parents cope. So, yeah, it's on Amazon now. It's New Parent Relationship Kit, and the company is Good Talk Baby. We make it, and I'm so super excited about it.
That sounds amazing. Honestly, I've had so many conversations with new parents on the podcast. And so I think this is going to be a really great tool. And I think also it's really amazing that you've taken these experiences that you've had through your life and hard times and you created conversations for people, because I think you are right. There's so many faces and there's so many conversations that need to be had, and sitting in a room full of bottles and, I'm not a mom, so I'm trying to even think of what you get at baby showers, rattles and 75 onesies when you're really using the same one, and just knowing in that darkness and hard space that you're creating something for other people, I think is really great. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. We really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you just creating this space for people to share and telling real stories about from real people. I think what you're doing is amazing, and I'm always a big fan.
Thank you. Thanks for hanging out with us this week. If you'd like to connect with Lauren, you can find her on Instagram at Lauren Learns Life. If you'd like to check out Good Talk Baby, you can find the link in the podcast description, or you can search Good Talk Baby on Amazon to find the New Parent Relationship Kit. If you'd like to connect with me or have an experience you'd like to share, shoot me an email at letstalkitoutproductions@gmail.com. Also, if you liked our music, you can check out Quilter on Spotify. I Know How You Feel drops every other week. See you next time.